A battle which every single Jujutsu Kaisen fan has been theorizing from the very start of the series, an endless debate which has stirred up countless arguments all over the internet. I'm sure you guys know where I'm going with this, and that is the highly anticipated question: could full-form Sukuna beat Satoru Gojo? But before we answer this question, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new and hit that notification bell to stay updated when latest uploads. This video will contain spoilers from the manga. Well, since Gojo's and Sukuna's first encounter, a lot of things have developed since. We've been able to see what sort of powers lie inside the King of All Curses, and we also got to witness the famous Satoru Gojo getting sealed inside of the prison realm. But we all know that this battle between them will definitely take place again in the future, because it's inevitable. But with that said, we'll go through every little crook and cranny to figure out if a full-form Sukuna could defeat the strongest sorcerer of this generation. So without further ado, let's get straight in. Before we determine whether a full-form Sukuna could defeat Gojo, we'll first need to take a look at Sukuna and Gojo's very first interaction, or should I say battle. Chapter 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen would be when this famous battle would take place, and essentially it would be when everyone began questioning how much more powerful could Sukuna become. Anyways, with Gojo arriving on the scene, and with Yuji who is now back in control over his body after consuming the cursed finger, they have their first ever meeting. However, with Gojo getting a closer look on Yuji, he asked the high schooler to switch with Sukuna for only 10 seconds. But what we are getting at here is that with a single cursed finger, Yuji was able to regain control over his body. This could just simply be a Yuji thing, because from what we know down in the later chapters of the manga, is that Yuji was Kenjaku's little science experiment. It was even stated by Megami that if any other normal person were to consume the finger, then they would only have a 1 in a million chance of surviving. So don't get it twisted. Not anyone can become the vessel of Sukuna's, it's just that Yuji was set up to become Sukuna's host. With that said, I just wanted to remind everyone how powerful even a single cursed finger can be, and we even notice how the idea of Sukuna's fingers are used to scale other characters. For example, when Jogo had asked Kenjaku at the restaurant how many cursed fingers he would be scaled at, with Kenjaku replying that if he overestimates it, then Jogo would be around 8 or 9 fingers. But later on, Jogo would come to realize that he's nowhere near as many fingers during his battle against Sukuna, but that's something we'll discuss later on in the video. Anyways, as soon as Yuji switches with Sukuna, the King of All Curses takes no time to pounce at Gojo. From an immense height and then attempting to claw at Gojo, he fails to do so. With an opening, Gojo grabs Sukuna and gives him a little chop on the back of his neck. Sukuna realizes to himself that Gojo is unbelievably fast, but this little statement right here could come to Sukuna's defense on whether he can take down Satoru Gojo in his full form. Sukuna says to Gojo, "It doesn't matter what era it is, you guys are always a pain." What I believe Sukuna means by this is that 1000 years ago, when Sukuna was classed as the greatest walking disaster, he must have gone on to battle sorcerers on the same level as Gojo. He wasn't all that surprised when Gojo knocked him down, but more so eager to fight him, regardless of Sukuna's strength only being worth a single finger. At that moment, Sukuna must have believed that he would be able to put some sort of damage on Gojo if he had more time. He was even capable of destroying the ground with such ease, but that's when they hit the time limit of 10 seconds as Yuji forces back his control on Sukuna. Although there wasn't much to take from this fight, Sukuna displaying the power of one cursed finger was immense. The part where I mentioned how Sukuna believed that he'd be able to do some damage on Gojo if he had a little more time, even though he only has the power of one single finger, can be backed up. How? Well, we'll need to go all the way to chapter 181 of the manga. Sukuna's experience during the golden age of shamans could be understood when he made this little cameo at the beginning of the chapter. Right after Yuta's victory against Ishigori and Takako, Sukuna can be seen sitting alone in his full form. This backhanded criticism I believe is directed towards Yuta. Sukuna states, "You're the one who'll reach your limit. I've seen it all before. Sorcerers, cursed spirits, it doesn't matter. The only ones who are able to transcend beyond being merely strong are those with an overwhelming sense of self and a complete disregard for others, natural disasters." What can be taken out of this statement is that Sukuna truly doesn't care who you are or how strong you are. And we notice that with the way he approached the battle against Gojo, he was definitely aware of the powers and abilities that Satoru Gojo yields, yet still went for him as though he had a death wish. This just implies that with the amount of experience Sukuna has, even with a measly single cursed finger, it's his complete disregard for others that make him such a frightening foe. My theory is that if Sukuna had more than 10 seconds, he may have been able to inflict some damage to Satoru Gojo. However, we do understand that Gojo was only toying with him, but with Sukuna's experience, who knows what could have happened. There was a defining battle that really tested Satoru Gojo, and that came in the Shibuya incident arc, where Gojo would enter the curtain and to his surprise, fall into the trap that Kenjaku had planned all along. Gojo would find himself at the bottom platform at Shibuya Station, taking on Choso, Jogo and Hanami. This battle in itself forced Gojo on the back foot, having to use his intelligence more than his own powers and abilities, mainly because Gojo's battle against these cursed spirits would involve the lives of hundreds of civilians. Kenjaku mentioned that Gojo wouldn't be able to sacrifice the lives of others, since the lives taken away by the cursed spirits he has no control over. This eventually became a battle of strategic planning, with Jogo and Hanami using domain amplification, making Gojo become vulnerable to their attacks regardless of his infinity. But we then realized not only is Gojo gifted through his cursed techniques, but also through his physical abilities, deactivating his infinity and ripping the arm off Jogo and eventually calling Hanami's bluff and pulverizing him to nothing but ashes. Through this action alone, he was able to somehow change his defense into immediate offense, with Jogo running into the crowd to keep himself safe. That is when Mahito would intervene, unleashing the countless transfigured humans to massacre the innocent civilians at the station. But the standout moment of this particular battle was the ability and quick-wittedness to activate his domain expansion Infinite Void for a matter of 0.2 seconds, killing all 1000 transfigured humans in only 299 seconds. Even if you were to have Gojo up against the wall, he'll always find a solution to the problem, even if it does come at the price of a few lives. But with that said, the only reason why Gojo got caught within the prison realm is due to Gojo's sense of protecting the innocent, and is the only barrier that separates himself and Ryomen's Sukuna. If Sukuna were to be pitted in the same situation, we all know he'd use his domain expansion Malevolent Shrine to kill absolutely anyone and anything. However, Gojo's strongest ability is easily his domain expansion. Due to such a technique, paralyzing those who enter with infinite information is on a completely different level. The likes of Jogo already sensed death once he got caught up, and his mesmerizing nature of literally turning Gojo into a god. Although Gojo got caught inside of the prison realm, he is still the strongest sorcerer of this current generation, but another battle which is on par with Gojo's is Sukuna's fights against both Jogo and the famous Mahoraga. These two battles right here are the most convincing source as to why and how we could see Sukuna overpower Gojo in the near future. Anyways, it's stated that the confrontation between Mimiko, Nanako, Jogo and Sukuna was that Sukuna now had the power of 15 cursed fingers, which is 5 fingers away from Sukuna returning back to his full form. But with Sukuna obliterating Nanako and Mimiko, he offers Jogo to a battle, stating if Jogo wins, he'll kill every living being within Shibuya bar one, and that one was of course Megumi. Straight after from the high-rise building, Sukuna and Jogo could be seen in the air, with Jogo already looking like he's been defeated, and Sukuna with a massive grin on his face, asking him if that's all he's got. But just like Gojo's battle with Jogo, Jogo would be getting beaten to a pulp from every one of Sukuna's attacks. So much so that Sukuna dodged Jogo's attack and literally teleported behind him to smash him 7 stories down a skyscraper, and that was just mere strength alone. At this moment, Jogo would contemplate Kenjaku's generous prediction of him being the strength of 8 or 9 cursed fingers. He realizes that the difference is far much greater than what he initially thought, but long story short, even up against Jogo's maximum meteor, Sukuna still found the time to threaten Kusakabe and Panda, and also be able to dodge the massive meteor. Sukuna would then finish the battle against a cursed spirit who specializes in flames by using a flaming bow and arrow to burn Jogo to death. So in a similar fashion to Gojo, Sukuna was able to finish the job. But it wouldn't be until a specific battle where we started to get shouts that Sukuna could possibly defeat Gojo if he were to regain his full strength, and that would be his battle against Mahoraga. What we need to understand about Mahoraga is that this Shikigami can adapt and overcome any ability put in his way in order to kill its target. We noticed this when Sukuna had unleashed his domain expansion Malevolent Shrine, using a 140 meter radius instead of his usual 200. Sukuna would turn everything within this perimeter into dust, including the countless lives and buildings. But Mahoraga managed to adapt to such an ability. Although it was crawling, it was still regenerating, meaning the next wave of Mahoraga's attacks could have been fatal to Sukuna. But that's when Sukuna uses smarts, realizing the immense ability Mahoraga yields, he would unleash a much more lethal flaming arrow towards the Shikigami to ultimately defeat him. A very important fact from this battle was Gojo and Megumi's conversation in a flashback. Gojo mentioned that in the Keicho period, a 6 Eyes and Limitless user came up against a 10 Shadows technique user, resulting in both of their deaths. Basically meaning in that battle, Mahoraga may have been unleashed and defeated the 6 Eyes and Limitless technique user. That's just a theory of mine. However, Sukuna was capable of defeating Mahoraga with only the strength of 15 fingers, which would only be 75% of his true power. This now brings us to the powers and abilities of both characters. Gojo of course has the limitless techniques to his advantage with the likes of blue, red and purple, but what needs to be taken notice of is his purple technique. We all saw the kind of damage it can inflict. He destroyed an entire field in Hanami with a single blast during the Kyoto Goodwill event arc, and also killed Toji with a premature version of the purple technique. You have then got Gojo's superpower that would easily be his domain expansion. I mentioned before how it practically turns him into a god by feeding the person inside with infinite information. But when you take a look at Gojo's domain expansion from afar, it does look like something that can be counted against. However, when we compare it to Sukuna's domain expansion in Malevolent Shrine, it's the complete opposite, instead creating a hellhole that dismantles anything in sight just to dust. But with that said, Sukuna has his two blades known as Dismantle and Cleave, which puts him in such a physical advantage. He also has his flame arrow that managed to defeat both Jogo and Mahoraga. But due to us not knowing what else Sukuna could have under his sleeve, when it comes down to Jujutsu abilities alone, Gojo takes the cake. But this takes us to the ultimate question, and that is, could full form Sukuna beat Gojo? What we've analysed so far and what we've taken from a 15-fingered Sukuna, he will most certainly put up a hell of a fight against Gojo. There's not been a single character other than Toji who was able to take on Satoru Gojo in a one-on-one. Kenjaku used some smart tactics to get Gojo out of the way of his plans, but Ryomen Sukuna would easily be able to go head to head with Satoru Gojo if he were to be at its full 20-finger capacity. If we run it back to Jogo's statement, he mentioned how he didn't realize that the difference would be that great in terms of Sukuna's strength. This is something I believe, and that is Sukuna's fingers don't all share an equal power with each other. From what Jogo stated, then it must be that some cursed fingers may not have the same power as another finger, which was stored somewhere else, because with only 15 fingers Sukuna was able to defeat Mahoraga, and that wouldn't make sense if all of his fingers were of equal power. So the next 5 fingers that Sukuna may consume could be the game breaker towards himself defeating Satoru Gojo. But we also have to keep in mind that we haven't really seen Gojo put in a one-on-one situation where he goes all out. It's just like Kenjaku mentioned, Gojo is the strongest when he is alone, and that is 100% true. If there were no civilians in his battle against the cursed spirits, they all would have been dead in minutes. But Sukuna is completely different when compared to those curses. His experience during the golden age of shamans may even edge him towards the victory against Gojo. So for me, I believe that a full form Sukuna with all 20 fingers can actually defeat Satoru Gojo. My main evidence being the Mahoraga fight. If a sorcerer of the same stature as Gojo was killed by it, then I'd have to go for the king of all curses to come out on top against Satoru Gojo. But Jujutsu Kaisen is unpredictable. I hope that we do get to see both Gojo and Sukuna fight at full strength to finally put this ongoing debate to bed. Just a little disclaimer, this is what I believe, and I'm sure there are those out there who disagree. If you do, then comment down below and give a reason as to why you think that. I'd love to see your guys' take on this battle. But anyways, we've come to the end of this video. I'm sure I could go on and on, but we're still yet to see what each of these characters are truly capable of. Like I said, comment down your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. As always, like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you all in the next one.